everyone to Genscape's Canadian NGL production forecast webinar. What I would first like to start with is letting everyone know how to ask a question if you'd like to do so during the presentation. You can enter your questions in the highlighted area there in the webinar box, and questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. The things we'll be covering today, first we'll introduce you to the analysts behind our natural gas production forecasting services and our natural gas services, as well as go through Genscape's NGL forecasting service reports. We'll talk a little bit about what differentiates Genscape from others, and then we'll dive into our Canadian NGL production outlook. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about our U.S. production outlook, and then outline what future NGL products look like. Our analysts here on the NGL product side are myself, Bob Simmons, and Sonia, and we are responsible for the forecasting service products for natural gas liquids. And Randall Collum, who is leader over the forecasting group, also publishes our natural gas production forecast report that we utilize within our natural gas liquids forecast. The production forecast reports that are included within our services, first of all, the Canadian NGL forecast reports consist of our NGL production forecast report that's published every 6 weeks. Along with that comes the data behind the forecast. With that data, the historical data is provided back to 2007 with the forecast going through 2018. The data is broken down by NGL components and by processing plant type. We also provide quarterly conference call notes and the monthly gas processing database, which is detailed information down to the gas processing plant level that we have gathered from province data. Our U.S. NGL forecast reports consist of similar items. You've got the production forecast report, which we publish every 6 weeks, as well as the data behind that forecast report. Again, history included back to 2006, and the forecast through 2018. It is also broke down by component and about 16 regions, and then rolled up to a pad level. We also include a weekly ethane rejection report, our monthly comparison to EIA, which is mainly how well our forecast actualized relative to the EIA, quarterly conference call notes, and also a gas processing database, again, that details out inlet and outlet data by gas processing plant. And in the U.S., we've done that for about 7 states. What differentiates Genscape? Genscape's proprietary natural gas forecast is the backbone for our Canadian gas processing throughput models. Our natural gas production forecast has been developed at the plant level. We've also taken the NGL mix component that's reported by the Alberta Energy Regulation, and we've broken that down into its NGL components at the gas processing plant level. So we take the NGL mix and break it down into ethane, propane, butane, and natural gasoline. We've done extensive research of the infrastructure, which not only contributes to our production forecast, but it helps us break that NGL mix down into its various components. On the U.S. side, we've been able to utilize Genscape's proprietary monitoring capability, and that allows us to see operational issues in real time and how they may impact our production forecast. We calculate the NGL gallons per MCF at the tailgate of the gas plant, and that is measured against our proprietary natural gas and oil production forecasts. This allows us to get our GPMs at the tailgate of the plant calculated down to a detailed level, at times as detailed as the gas plant itself, and then rolled up into the various regions such as Eagle Ford, DJ Basin, etc. Pipeline data such as nominations and gas quality are also utilized. That helps us understand infrastructure impacts, and that is part of our calculated change in ethane production, which we can see changes occur on a daily basis, either to operational issues or to how gas quality is changing and impacting ethane production. Again, our forecast models have been broken down to 16 detailed regions, and many of those models have been developed at the gas processing plant, which greatly enhances our model accuracy. And then our forecast models are rolled up to the pad level. And thirdly, which we believe is one of the most important things that differentiates us, is that our analysts have industry experience. Now I'd like to start by walking you through our NGL production outlook for Western Canada through the end of 2015. Utilizing our proprietary natural gas production forecast, economics, and our understanding of Western Canada's infrastructure, we have developed throughput models at the various gas processing steps along the way, as you can see here in this flow chart. So we have throughput models for shallow cut plants, for straddle plants, and for deep cut plants. NGL production is calculated at each processing step between the wellhead and gas delivery to the end user, whether that be gas utilized within the province or exported into the U.S. Via the transmission lines or a lines pipeline. The data we have gathered and analyzed at the gas processing plant level allows us to understand the extraction capability at each and the GPM, how that's changing at the various processing steps along this flow chart. So we've calculated out our GPM at shallow cut plants. We've calculated the GPM at straddle plants as well as deep cut plants. The main themes that we see based off of our throughput analysis indicate that straddle plant throughput is declining, and this trend is likely to continue as natural gas exports continue to be displaced by U.S. production growth and conventional nat gas production declines in Western Canada. Secondly, deep cut processing throughput is increasing. This is due to new capacity that's being added in liquids-rich shale plays. Therefore, NGL production growth from deep cut plants is not only offsetting the declines seen in straddle plants, but it is the main driver behind production growth in our forecast. Our analysis shows that deep cut plants can be broken into three categories. This helps us enhance our production forecast, getting into the levels or the regions where we believe the majority of the growth is occurring. We break those down into plants where throughput is increasing, plants where throughput is decreasing, and plants where throughput is remaining constant. The key takeaway here is our analysis indicates that NGL extraction capability from deep cut plants is not currently being fully utilized. This can be seen here in this blue line as throughput has grown at various plants that are located in liquids-rich shale plays. The GPM at the tailgate of the plant has actually been declining, and we believe that is attributable to takeaway capacity, whether it be pipeline or fractionation capacity, has been a constraint that allows deep cut plants to fully utilize their extraction capability. Looking at the various plant types, shallow cut plants produce a propane and heavier natural gas liquid stream, with the highest percentage of that production being natural gasoline. Production is expected to remain relatively unchanged. decreasing by 4,000 barrels per day year on year during 2014 and slightly growing in 2015 by 2,000 barrels per day. New capacity is being added at the shallow cut level, mainly in the areas where the liquids-rich shale plays, the Montney and the Duvernay. However, the increased throughput there is being offset by throughput that is declining in other areas. At straddle plants, we see the production, as I mentioned there, declining. However, we still continue to see that being very seasonal. In 2014, we are forecast to remain unchanged relative to 2013, and this is mainly due to natural gas exports to the U.S. having been higher during the first part of this year, mainly driven by the cold temperatures seen across the U.S. 2015 is forecast to have year-on-year decline of minus 9,000 barrels per day. By the time the natural gas liquid stream reaches the straddle plants, the majority of the C5 has already been extracted at the shallow cuts, which leaves the majority of the extraction to taking place at straddle plants is ethane with a small chunk of LPG mix or purity propane and butane. As I mentioned before, the majority of our production growth is coming from the deep cut plants. This is due to processing capacity that is being added in the liquid-rich shale plays. We see roughly 400 million cubic feet a day of capacity being added during 2013 and the first half of 2014, and we expect another 810 million cubic feet a day of processing capacity to be added between now and the end of 2015. Our forecast is calling for year-on-year growth of 42,000 barrels per day during 2014 and 22,000 barrels per day during 2015. We do continue to see, as I mentioned before, that deep cut plants are not currently being utilized at their full extraction capability. As mentioned, this is due to downstream takeaway capacity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next coming slides. Now we'll look at the components of the natural gas liquid stream. During our forecast period, we're showing total natural gas liquids to grow by 36,000 barrels per day year on year in 2014 and by 14,000 barrels per day in 2015. We have ethane supply growing by 11,000 barrels a day in 2014 but remaining flat in 2015. We do not show growth in ethane beyond 2014, mainly related to additional supply that is coming from off-gas units and additional ethane supply being imported from North Dakota via the Vantage pipeline. These three supply, the addition of all of this supply added together exceeds at current ethylene cracker capacity of 255,000 barrels per day, which is why we think gas processing will remain flat as we will see the ethane rejected left in the natural gas stream going forward. Propane is expected to grow by 13,000 barrels a day in 2014 and by 6,000 barrels a day in 2015. Butane and natural gasoline, we are showing a 6,000 barrel per day increase in 2014 and a 3,000 barrel per day and 5,000 barrel per day increase respectively in 2015. Moving on to fractionation capacity and utilization. Currently, 53% of production from the tailgate of the gas processing plant is fractionated in Alberta. Fort Saskatchewan is the major hub with 75% of the total capacity in the province. This chart here shows how fractionation capacity in Fort Saskatchewan is currently underutilized. However, you can see that Dallas facility, Keyera's facility, and Pembina's facility are all running at near full capacity, with Plains being underutilized. I believe this is mainly related to infrastructure and how the liquids-rich areas are tied into certain fractionation facilities, but not all facilities. Fractionation capacity has been a constraint, and it has kept gas production from gas processing limited to the extent where it's not able to fully utilize the extraction capability at deep cut plants. However, we do see this changing. We expect to see 126,000 barrels per day of capacity being added between now and the end of 2015. And we see another 90,000 barrels a day being added by the end of 2018. Fractionation growth supports potential LNG production that is related to LNG export projects. We believe that with the projects that have been announced between now and the end of 2018, that we could see another 125,000 to 150,000 barrels a day of additional production growth that we currently do not have in our forecast. The LNG projects that are slated to begin operating now have send-out capacity that has been announced of around 5.5 BCF per day. We believe the additional LPG supply that's related to LNG exports will most likely be exported from the West Coast. Export facilities include the 30,000 barrel per day capacity at Ferndale that is currently operational, and projects that have been announced by Sage Midstream, Pembina, AltaGas, with capacity totaling an additional 115,000 barrels a day. As I kind of alluded to earlier, we do believe that ethane will end up being rejected unless the petchem industry makes the investments needed to increase the consumption capability in Alberta. So in conclusion on Western Canada, NGL production from straddle plants will continue to decline. New deep cut processing capacity and additional ethane plus fractionation capacity will remedy declines from straddle plants. NGL takeaway constraints that have been limiting the production potential from liquids-rich shale plays. Expectation of LNG-driven NGL growth is reflected in total fractionation capacity and that has been announced to be built. LNG and LPG export facilities will allow producers to capture the NGL value potential from liquids-rich shale plays. Now we'll move on to a quick overview of our forecast for NGL production growth from the U.S. Production forecast for the lower 48 is currently showing year-on-year growth of 418,000 barrels per day in 2014 and an additional 409,000 barrels per day in 2015. The major growth regions include the Marcellus Utica, Eagle Ford, Permian, DJ Basin, and North Dakota. NGL infrastructure such as gas processing, wide-grade pipeline, and fractionation that has been put in place or announced to be built is sufficient enough to handle the NGL growth that we are forecasting. Exports and petchem projects are in the works to increase consumption capability needed to support additional NGL supply. However, ethane demand projects are lagging supply infrastructure, therefore we anticipate rejection will not only continue but increase over the next 2 years. In the Northeast, we are showing growth of 144,000 barrels per day year-on-year in 2014 and an additional 113,000 barrels a day in 2015. We have gas processing increasing by 3.1 BCF per day in 2014 and fractionation capacity increasing 240,000 barrels per day in 2014. Recent ethane pipeline takeaway capacity has begun operating, and it has allowed ethane production to grow and will continue to grow throughout the remainder of the year as we export ethane via Mariner West to Canada and move ethane to the Gulf Coast along the ATEX pipeline. In PADD 2, we are seeing year-on-year growth of 81,000 barrels a day in 2014 and 104,000 barrels a day in 2015. The majority of this growth is seen taking place in the Mid-Continent and North Dakota. We're seeing processing capacity increase by 1.5 BCF a day in Oklahoma and Kansas during 2014 and growing by 255 million cubic feet a day in North Dakota. Pipeline capacity has also been increased to move our forecasted production growth out of these areas. That includes One Oak Sterling Pipeline and the Bakken Pipeline expansions, as well as DCP Southern Hills Pipeline. In Pad 3, we forecasted growth to be 168,000 barrels per day in 2014 and 152,000 barrels per day in 2015. The majority of this growth is taking place in the Eagle Ford and in the Permian basins. We're showing an expectation of an additional 3.0 BCF per day of processing capacity to be added in these regions throughout 2014, and an additional 138,000 barrels a day of frac capacity. So effectively, we have seen the processing capacity so far outstrip the production growth, and we would start to see production growth catch up to processing capacity as we move through 14 and into 15. Pipeline constraints have also been relieved in this area as projects have begun operating, such as Lone Star's West Texas Gateway Pipeline, DCP Sandhills, and Enterprise's expansion of their Eagle Ford system. In Pad 4, forecast growth for year-on-year is 25,000 barrels per day in 2014 and 39,000 barrels per day in 2015. So you can see here Pad 4 continues to be in high rejection mode across the majority of the plants in the area. We do have slightly growth taking place in ethane as we move forward in the DJ Basin with the addition of the processing capacity that's going on there, just to get the minimum amount of ethane out of the region. Increased takeaway capacity has also been added to support this NGL growth from the DJ Basin with the Front Range pipeline that interconnects with Texas Express to move the production down to Mont Belvieu. These charts here show the infrastructure projects that are currently have been announced from the beginning of 2014 through the end of 2016. And there's roughly 14.6 BCF per day of processing capacity coming online. 5.5 BCF of that is being added in the Marcellus Utica, and 4.4 BCF a day is being added in Texas. The other major growth areas are Colorado and Oklahoma. Fractionation capacity is also increasing by 743,000 barrels a day through the end of 16, with 390 of that being added in the Marcellus Utica and the rest being added along the Gulf Coast, Texas and Louisiana. Through our forecast and our infrastructure research, we do show how our production profile stacks up relative to announced growth that's taking place in the various pads and even in the detailed regions in which our forecast is compiled. So as you can see here within Pad 1, we do have ethane ramping up to about 150,000 barrels a day by the end of 2015, which is the majority of we believe to be the majority of the contracted space along either the Mariner West and Mariner East projects as well as the ATEX pipeline. As you can see, North Dakota, ethane is starting to come online here the second half of 2014 with the startup of the Vantage pipeline. However, we still see a lot of rejection taking place in North Dakota as it just is not economically feasible to bring it out at the moment. And the Pad 3 chart does show how we believe that gas processing capacity has been coming online faster than production growth, and we do believe that we will start to close that gap later on in 2014 and into 2015, as production will grow faster than processing capacity. And then in the DJ Basin, you can see how they have overbuilt, or not overbuilt, but they have built up the processing capacity and pipeline takeaway in anticipation of the production growth that is likely to occur in that area. So in conclusion, NGL production growth is expected to be robust from regions such as the Marcellus Utica, Eagle Ford, and Permian basins, Supply infrastructure such as gas processing, Y-grade pipeline, and fractionation have alleviated the NGL production growth constraints that had been in place previously. Supply infrastructure is now in place ahead of potential NGL growth in many regions, and large-scale build-out continues to occur. We are seeing processing growth ahead of production in the Eagle Ford, DJ Basin, and Marcellus Utica is now caught up and ahead of production growth in that area as well. Infrastructure is being built out to either consume or export propane, butane, and natural gasoline, and ethane demand capacity is lagging supply infrastructure, leading to sustained or even growing rejection over the next couple of years. Our future NGL forecasting products include a U.S. propane supply and demand balance. We will be forecasting into-season inventory levels and also forecasting the weekly change in inventory. Canadian supply and demand balance, and as well in the U.S. a supply and demand balance for ethane, propane, and natural gasoline. And that concludes what we're going to talk about today on our webinar, and we will go through now and answer questions.
All right, Bob, first question came in. Why are the GPM values so low for liquids-rich shales?
We're observing lower GPMs for the liquids-rich shales from the deep cut processing facilities that were put specifically in those regions. And the reason for that is that there is a lot of rejection going on in expectation of a build-out of the NGL mix takeaway capacity as well as NGL mix fractionation capacity in Fort Saskatchewan. So unlike United States, which allows only ethane rejection, in Canada there is definitely more than just ethane rejection going on at the moment, and that's why GPM does not reflect the true liquids, the total value of the liquids in the gas stream due to the rejection.
All right, question number 2. How do you break down the AER NGL mix volumes into components?
I think that if we take a look at the diagram that we prepared, the gas processing for Canada, it's a multi-stage process. So depending on the stage, whether it's the upstream processing or downstream processing, we're able to tell how much liquids will drop out. And also what matters is that where exactly those liquids will be dropping out. If we know that it's upstream shallow cut, we know that, and we also know the gas specs at that inlet, we are able to break down the NGL mix as a result of the stage where the processing extraction occurs, as well as the facility specifications. And as we move further downstream and follow the gas stream that has gone through the first stage of the processing, let's say if it's following the diagram, following the path of shallow to straddle plants, we know that by the time it gets to the straddle plants, the composition of the NGL mix will be devoid of the pentanes and will have a very much higher ethane content. So based on that, as I mentioned, just to sum it up, it depends on the plant specifications, gas inlet specifications, as well as which specific stage of the processing that the gas is going through, which allows us to break down the liquids.
All right, next question. How is LNG growth in Western Canada driving NGL growth when there are no gas pipelines to BC yet?
Our current and near-term NGL growth is driven by the deep cut processing facilities that were put there to process the gas from the liquids-rich shales, which is replacing the drop in production from the conventional gas, from the dry gas. Any future growth due to the LNG, this will be, that's what we refer to as LNG-driven NGL growth. So at the moment, we recognize that even though there is no LNG pipelines in place yet, the frac capacity build-out as well as the pipeline capacity build-out from BC to Fort Saskatchewan allows us to predict and forecast the specification of the NGL mix as well as the amount, the liquids associated with specific LNG projects. So our near-term goal is based on the replacement of the dry gas with the liquids-rich shale, and the future NGL growth will be the LNG.
All right, next question. Straddle plants have underutilized capacity. Is there any infrastructure effort to utilize processing and frac capacity at straddle plants for volumes that are not meant for exports?
Due to the location of the straddle plants as well as the specifics around the title to liquids of the straddle plants, it will be very hard to utilize the processing and fractionation capacity of the straddle plants because the location, which would be right on the border of the right on the export border, we really don't see any utilization of that capacity unless it is for volumes that were destined for export. So any volumes that are not destined for exports will find the processing and fractionation in the new build-out of the deep cut or shallow cut capacities upstream of the Empress.
All right, next question. Do you have a curve you can share similar to the various U.S. PADD ones that show Canadian and or Alberta NGL supply takeaway fractionation?
Okay. Do you have a curve? So can you repeat that, Randall? Make sure I got all that.
Do you have a curve you can share similar to the various U.S. PADD ones that show Canadian and or Alberta NGL supply takeaway fractionation?
Okay. Yeah. If you're looking for NGL or our NGL production forecast profile relative to takeaway capacity relative to pipelines and fractionation, yes, we do have the data, and that is charts that we can put together and show those type of information.
All right, and last question, unless other ones pop up here. Do you see any additional demand for ethane feedstock coming up to raise demand from the current 255,000 barrels a day level?
We have not seen any announcements other than the Joffre capacity expansion, which is based on the existing built-in capacity. So unless there is any new announcement for steam cracker capacity, we're holding our current ethylene capacity at 255,000 barrels per day of ethane feedstock. So it usually takes a bit more time and interest on more of a polyolefin level for the steam crackers to start making those kinds of expansions and announcements. But we have seen and taken into our forecast and accounts the announcements for the PDH facility, which will be taking 22,000 barrels per day of the propane.
All right, thanks, Sonia. I do not see. Oh, wait, here. There's one more question that just came in for you. I guess this is with regards to the NGLs. What is your view on the Duvernay shale?
From the NGL or gas perspective.
Hey, Randall, can you preface that by talking a little bit about nat gas in Duvernay shale and what kind of drilling and stuff that you're seeing there? Because our natural gas liquids forecast will be greatly impacted by the amount of natural gas growth that we see coming from that area.
Yeah, as of now, we see very little gas production growth out of that area. Maybe just a couple 100 million a day by the end of next year. The associated gas rates with the oil drilling mainly there have been relatively low. So we don't really see much of a ramp up on the gas side till probably 2016 and even greater than that. There's a lot of interest in it and a lot of testing going on, but right now the gas production associated with it is very small, and we expect it to stay small. But you're not going to see any kind of growth there like you would see out of like the BC shales because there's just a lot higher IP rates there on the gas side.
And to add to that, since our natural gas liquids forecast is tied to our natural gas forecast, as we start to see that growth occur, then we will start to build in increased production forecast from the Duvernay into our natural gas liquids forecast And one of the ways we do that in new areas is looking through company presentations, going through 10Qs, 10Ks, finding any GPM information that we can within that area, and we would start to utilize very specific company information to start to build out our production forecast for NGLs until we start to see things actualize and see how things are going to trend going forward.
And on the gas processing side, we have not mentioned, but there is a lot of underutilized gas processing capacity. So as additional production starts to pick up in the regions such as Duvernay, which has not been as fast and as prolific as Montney, there is going to be a lot of built-in underutilized processing capacity in the region, which would require only gathering connections. And this is something that will start appearing in the form of data as the drilling picks up in that region.
All right, and actually 2 more questions came in, guys. First one is, how much ethane is estimated to be in Vantage and max assumed for Tioga?
We currently have Vantage pipeline capacity of 40,000 barrels per day. However, we do believe that Tioga ethane extraction capability is only roughly 30,000 barrels per day, and we have that the pipeline ramping up over the remainder of the year. We started, I think, seeing production potentially flow into that pipeline in May, and we were able to see that through various natural gas nomination points. We tied to Tioga plant and through gas quality as well, probably somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 barrels a day currently.
All right, next question as of now, last question. Do you expect the USnox SOX legislation affecting NGLs?
We don't see that currently, no.
All right, so that's all the questions that have come through. If you do have any other questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to myself, Randall Collum, or Bob Simmons, or Sonia Canova. Our contact information is right up there on the screen right now. If you need anything, please reach out and we will help you any way we can. Thanks a lot for attending today.